In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace a front CV axle on a Jeep Liberty located in the front differential. Remove the caliper from the knuckle, 21mm socket. There's 2 mounting bolts and the bracket to the knuckle. I'm going to use a caliper hanging hook because the whole point is that you don't want to put any strain on the flex hose or that ABS. Just hang it from that top control arm. So now we're going to remove the rotor, which looks like it's going to be kind of difficult with all this corrosion. So let's give it a spray down. And we're going to use a hammer. We're going to just tap on that. I'm going to tap on the hat side. All right, I'm going to use an air chisel to vibrate that off the wheel bearing. Just like that. Remove it. So the best way I think to take this nut off is going to be with an air chisel. And we're going to go that route first, and let's see if we can get rid of this nastiness. What we're going to do is try to split it. So now I'm able to put a 32mm socket on there. Look at that. So now we're going to remove our tie rod end so that we can get our knuckle out for the axle. 21mm socket. I'm going to give it a tap on the knuckle. So now we're going to take the lower bolt that holds the wishbone bracket to the lower control arm. And it's a 21mm wrench for the nut side and 18mm socket for the bolt head. And now I'm going to take the upper pinch bolt off that wishbone, and that's an 18mm socket on the head side and 21 for the nut side. Sometimes when I have a stuck bolt like that, I'll put the socket on and I'll put a wrench in. There we go. So 21mm wrench or socket. We're going to take the upper control arm nut off. So we're going to break it free. Take that down. I'm going to leave it on there just a tad before I tap it. There we go. I'll take the nut off the rest of the way. 18mm socket. We're going to disconnect that lower sway bar link to control arm bolt. That'll give us the throw on that control arm to get that axle out. So now I'm going to loosen up this axle from the center of this hub with the splines. I'm going to use an air chisel. You can use a hammer. Let's break this free, see if we can get some throw out of it. Now in this position we could take this wishbone right out of the way. Set it aside. See if we can get that axle out the rest of the way. I'm going to disconnect these clips, which I probably should have done sooner. If you're watching this before you do the job, do this first. See, even pros make little mistakes. Now we have more slack. So much nicer. Here we go. I'm going to get a catch basin before I take that out of the diff. So now from underneath, you want to take a pry bar or an axle fork if you have one, and just put it right on the back of that and just give it a good push. Just like that. Now you can pull that CV axle right out. And that's why you have the catch basin underneath, and remove it. Now we're going to take our new axle, and you always want to put the opening of that little lock pin, like that spline or whatever you want to call it, try to put it like at 6 o'clock. Now with both hands, just give it a push, let it slide in. Now I'm going to take some copper C's spray. I'm going to just put it on these splines. Eliminate any future aggravation for somebody. There we go. Line it up on that wheel bearing. Beautiful. I'm just going to take my new CV axle nut, just put it on by hand like that so it doesn't pull it out too much. And now I'm going to take that wishbone. Make sure you put this in the routing that it's going to be. Bring this down. Don't forget that you can push down on this control arm to line it up. There we go. I've got the bolt for that pinch bolt. That's all the way up. Put that through. Just snug it because we're going to torque it. Torque spec on the pinch bolt for that wishbone bracket is 75 foot-pounds. So now we're going to put the upper ball joint in that knuckle before we raise it and tighten the whole lower. That's a 21 millimeter. I'm just going to snug it up before I tighten it. Now we're going to reattach our tie rod end. Put our lock nut on. Snug it up. 18 millimeter socket. We're going to torque the outer tie rod to knuckle at 30 foot-pounds. So now we're going to put our pole jack underneath because we need to raise the suspension so it acts like it's on the ground level in order to get the sway bar link in and that wishbone into that control arm bushing. Then we'll torque it all at the right height. Put the nut on. So because of the angle of this sway bar, I'm going to loosen up the top bolt. I'm not going to take it out, I just want to loosen it. Two 18 millimeters, and a socket and a wrench. So let's see if I can line it up a lot easier. Yeah, see, I have a lot more play with it. Now we're not putting all that torque on that. Now I'm going to give it some pressure and see if I can get it to the proper ride height. And I'll start tightening everything and torque it down. 18 millimeter socket, I'm going to start that lower link. So the lower sway bar link to control arm is 75 foot-pounds. That's 18 millimeter socket. 18 millimeter socket and wrench. The upper sway bar link to rod is 75 foot-pounds. So now we're going to tighten up the wishbone going into the control arm bolt. 18 millimeter socket and 21 wrench on the nut side. The torque spec is 110 foot-pounds. So while the suspension is ride height tension, we're going to put a 21 millimeter socket on the upper ball joint nut, and we're going to tighten that to 30 foot-pounds. Now we can undo the pole jack and bring the suspension down. So now we can tighten our spindle nut for the CV axle. That is a 36 millimeter socket, and we're just going to literally snug it because you don't want to go past. You can damage the bearing, and the spindle torque for this is only 100 foot-pounds. As soon as it stops, that's it. All right, so I'm going to torque this in the air, and I'm going to use a long pry bar. I'm going to use the leverage of the wheel studs, and I have my torque wrench set to the 100 foot-pounds. Now we can put our brakes back. Back into the caliper bracket to knuckle. Always starting by hand. Get a top one and a lower one. Now I'm going to snug it up. Caliper bracket to knuckle bolts are 21 millimeter socket, and it's 100 foot-pounds. Double check. So now I'm going to reconnect that ABS sensor wire to the actual flex hose. Now we're going to reinstall the wheel. Put your lug nuts on. It's going to be a 19 millimeter socket. We're going to snug them up in a star pattern or crisscross. Just bottom them out. Now we're going to lower it and torque the wheel to spec. Wheel torque for this car is 85 to 115 foot-pounds, and we're going to go at 110. I recommend using the age of the vehicle, and the higher the number for older wheel studs and lug nuts because they get stretched. Double check. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.